Jesus is the answer for the world today.
Hello, family. Pastor Laulu from Christian Pentecostal Church here, and today we want to continue our Holy series and talk about, well, we're in Genesis chapter 5, right? None other than Enoch. Enoch, we find Enoch seventh from Adam, Enoch, not the Enoch from the line of Cain, but the Enoch from the line of Seth, seventh from Adam. Find him mentioned very few times in Scripture. We see him in the genealogies often, because it goes to the genealogies of Christ, right? But we also see him mentioned when in Hebrews, in Genesis chapter 5, in Hebrews 11:5, and also in the book of Jude 1:14, right? And here's what we know about Enoch. And I'm going to read from the Hebrews chapter 11 verse 5. It says, by faith, reading from the Amplified, that pleased God, Enoch was caught up and taken to heaven so that he would not have a glimpse of death. And he was not found because God had taken him. For even before he was taken to heaven, he received the testimony, still on record, that he had walked with God and pleased him. And if we read in Genesis 5:21 to 24, it says, when Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah. Enoch walked in habitual fellowship with God 300 years after the birth of Methuselah and had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and in reverent fear and obedience, Enoch walked with God, and he was not found among men, because God took him away to be home with him. When we read of Enoch, it's puzzling, right? I've heard Bible trivia more often, like, who was it that never died? Enoch. Why, though? We see here, as scripture tells us, that he pleased God, and because he pleased God, he would not have a glimpse of death. That he walked in reverent fear and obedience with God. And because of that, God did not let him die, but took him home. And it's like, we've heard about, okay, what about Moses? But in the case of Moses, yes, Moses went up and he no longer saw him anymore. But we know that Moses' body existed because scripture tells us about the dispute over his body. But Enoch just wasn't anymore. And I don't know how to explain that. I don't know what to say there. But that God, it pleased God that because of Enoch's reverent fear and obedience of him, that he took him home and he didn't glimpse, taste, experience death. What was it about Enoch that made him so peculiar that God said, was it pure grace, or was it a reward of his works in this case? Scripture doesn't exactly establish that, but it only says that because of his reverent obedience. So it leans a little more towards like, hey, this faith that he had in God, God said, you're coming home. Come home with me. And we see that Enoch, right after Enoch is Methuselah. And after Methuselah is Lamech. After Lamech is Noah. And then the flood. And it's like, okay, Enoch, you went home to be with God. What an experience that would be, to say that we walk with God in that reverent fear and obedience, and that God, we are habitually in fellowship with God at all times, and that it will please God to say, you come with me. I want you home with me. God is awesome. When I really think about this, it's like, what more can we say other than, wow? What was it about you, Enoch? Or is it God, because you are so holy, you determined that for Enoch, that was his fate. That was what he was called for. And what's amazing here is that it pleased God to take him home, and it pleased God to place it in record through the genealogies and in record to say that this happened to Enoch specifically. He is a living testimony of something to desire after, to walk with God in reverent fear and obedience. And how amazing it is that we who live on this side of the covenant, who live in the side where the Spirit of God dwells within us, where we are actually walking and living with God on the daily prior to the coming of Christ again, but with the Spirit of God dwelling within us, that we have been empowered and been graced with this privilege to be with God 24/7. What testimony will we have? Will it be on record that we will be said of us that we walked in reverent fear and obedience of God by the grace that He has given us? That's what my desire, my testimony to be. And I pray to God that that's the testimony you desire, that of an Enoch, to say, that's who you were. You were a child of the living God. Nothing more, nothing less. That is what you held above anything else in this world. And it's on record for all to see. So God bless you. And I pray that this is our testimony. Let us be like Enoch, but with something greater. We have been graced with the Spirit of God dwelling within us. So let us walk in reverent fear and obedience and fellowship with God. And by His grace, as He has promised, He will see us through. God bless you.